Everything you were taught about how civilization began is built on one assumption, that farming came first. Humans settled down, grew crops, produced surplus food, and only then did they have the time and organization to build temples, monuments, and cities. In the 1990s, archaeologists found a site in southeastern Turkey that broke that assumption completely. A massive stone temple complex built by people who hadn't invented farming yet. It's called Göbekli Tepe, and it might be the single most important archaeological discovery of the last century. Here's why it's rewriting the story of how civilization actually began. What they found, Göbekli Tepe sits on a hilltop in modern-day Turkey. It consists of massive circular enclosures ringed by T-shaped limestone pillars, some standing over 5 meters tall and weighing up to 10 tons. The pillars are covered in carved reliefs, foxes, snakes, scorpions, vultures, wild boar, rendered with a real artistic skill. This wasn't crude symbolic scratching. Somebody planned this, designed it, and had the ability to execute a complex artistic vision in stone. Radiocarbon dating places construction at around 9,600 BCE. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge and 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza. Why the timeline is the problem. Here's where it gets disruptive. 9,600 BCE is before agriculture existed anywhere on Earth. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. For over a century, the dominant model in archaeology was simple. Agriculture had to come first. You needed stable food surplus before you could support specialized labor, before you could support builders, artists, and organizers who weren't out hunting or foraging every single day. Göbekli Tepe doesn't fit that model. There's no evidence of farming at the site during its earliest construction phases, no domesticated crops, no livestock pens, just hundreds of people coordinating labor, quarrying, and moving multi-ton stone pillars without the food surplus that was supposed to be a prerequisite for exactly this kind of project. So archaeologists had two options. Either the dating was wrong or the old model was wrong. The dating has been independently confirmed multiple times, which leaves the second option. The theory. That flips everything. Klaus Schmidt, the archaeologist who led the excavation for 2 decades, proposed something radical. What if religion didn't emerge after agriculture? What if it came first and actually helped cause it? The theory goes like this. Building something like Göbekli Tepe required gathering large groups of hunter-gatherers in one place for extended periods to quarry stone, carve pillars, and construct enclosures. Feeding hundreds of people who are staying put instead of following seasonal game and wild plants creates enormous pressure. You need a denser, more reliable food source right there near the site. Some researchers argue that pressure is exactly what pushed early humans toward deliberately cultivating wild wheat instead of just gathering it. In fact, genetic studies on einkorn wheat, one of the earliest domesticated grains, trace its origins to wild populations growing in the hills near Göbekli Tepe itself. If that's right, the sequence isn't farming, then temples. It's temples, then farming. People didn't build monuments because they had free time from agriculture. They may have invented agriculture because they needed to feed the people building the monument. The pushback. Not every archaeologist agrees with this fully. Some argue Göbekli Tepe's builders may have already been semi-sedentary, gathering seasonally in larger numbers than typical hunter-gatherer bands, which would soften the contradiction a little. Others point out that religious motivation and agricultural necessity likely developed together in a feedback loop rather than one cleanly causing the other. Complex causation, not a straightforward line, is often how big historical shifts work. But even the more cautious version of this argument is still enormously significant. At minimum, Göbekli Tepe proves that hunter-gatherers were capable of large-scale coordinated construction, complex symbolic art, and long-term planning, all without agriculture, writing, or metal tools. That alone dismantles decades of assumptions about what primitive societies were capable of. The second mystery. Why they buried it. Here's the part that gets almost as much attention as the site itself. Around 8000 BCE, roughly 1,600 years after construction began, the entire site was deliberately buried, not abandoned. Buried. Someone filled the enclosures with rubble, broken stone, and debris on purpose, burying pillars that were still structurally intact. Nobody fully agrees on why. One theory suggests it was ritual, a deliberate act of closing a sacred site once its purpose had been fulfilled. Another suggests changing beliefs. Perhaps a new religious or social structure replaced the old one. And burial was a symbolic break with the past. There's also a more practical theory. As agriculture spread and populations grew, the loose, seasonal gathering that built Göbekli Tepe may have simply given way to permanent villages elsewhere, and the site lost its central importance. Whatever the reason, that burial is actually the reason the site survived so well. The rubble protected the pillars from erosion and looting for nearly 10,000 years, essentially fossilizing a moment in human history that we were never supposed to see. Here's the honest state of the debate. We don't know for certain that religion caused agriculture. But we know the old, simple story, farming first, temples later, doesn't survive contact with Göbekli Tepe. Somewhere in that gap between certainty and mystery is a genuinely uncomfortable idea. Civilization might not have started because people figured out how to feed themselves more efficiently. It might have started because people wanted something enough, a shared belief, a shared ritual, to organize their lives around it, and the food system was invented to support that goal, not the other way around. We like to think of ourselves as fundamentally practical. Göbekli Tepe suggests we might be fundamentally spiritual first and practical second. Do you think religion built civilization or civilization built religion? Comment your take. I read everyone. And if this kind of mystery is your thing, the pyramid construction video is right here.